can be also an offensive threat. This is yet another example of why it is so important to look at the whole dog, not just the tail. When watching the tail, notice, is it carried low or high? How does it change over the course of your observations? Is the hair on the tail fluffed up? Is the tail stationary or wagging? If the tail is wagging, is it wagging quickly or slowly? How does the rest of the dog look? Lastly, look at the dog's overall stance and body carriage. In reality, you'll probably observe this as you scan through the rest of the observational details we've already discussed. Dogs in a neutral emotional state who are just hanging out, or those showing friendly behavior, will have a relaxed, at-ease appearance. Their bodies will appear soft and will move without inhibition or tenseness. They can be sitting, standing, or laying down. If standing, their weight is fairly evenly distributed over all 4 feet. They don't appear to be leaning forward or leaning back. The more alert a dog becomes, the more the muscles become tense and his movements become less frequent and less fluid. He may appear rigid and hold one position for a relatively long time. Dogs who are alert or being offensively threatening will stand very erect and may lean forward, heads held high, with more of their weight on their front feet as though they're ready to charge or spring. Threatening dogs may face you and stare at you. Dogs who are afraid or defensive won't stand as tall. They may be partially crouched or cowered. Their heads and necks may be held low, or they may sit down. They may be more likely to turn away from you, and those who are very fearful, without being defensive, may roll over or partially roll over and spread their legs, showing their bellies. Occasionally, you may be lucky enough to encounter a dog in a play bow. A play bow is not only an invitation to play, but also signals to the other individual that the behavior which follows should not be taken seriously. Thus, a dog can growl, snap, mount, and show her teeth during play, and her companion won't be threatened. At this time, please stop the video and answer the review questions in your workbook. Now that we've covered what to observe, let's now discuss in more detail how to interpret the postures you see. In order to better understand how these interpretations relate to each other and to the different contexts the behaviors occur, we need to define some concepts and terms. Most of the behaviors and postures we've discussed fall into the category of agonistic behaviors. Agonistic behaviors are those behaviors that dogs can show in social situations in which they feel threatened or challenged. They represent the choices dogs can make when responding to these challenges. Included in the agonistic behavioral system are escape behaviors, submissive or appeasement behaviors, threats, which can be either offensive or defensive, and aggression, which can also be offensive or defensive. Let's consider each of these in turn. One choice a dog can make is to just leave the situation. If you can provide a threatening or fearful dog with an escape route, you may be able to prevent him from becoming more threatened and attempting to bite you. Alternatively, if the dog feels trapped or cornered because he is on a leash, for example, threats and aggression may be more likely. This is probably one reason why dogs are less friendly toward other dogs when they're on leashes, as compared to when they are off leash. Another choice a dog can make when threatened is to act out a non-threatening behavior in response. Non-threatening behavior serves to turn off the threat from the other individual. These non-threatening behaviors are called appeasement or submissive behaviors. A clear example is this puppy licking the face of this adult. Notice also the laid-back ears and partially closed eyes, which are also examples of submissive postures. This face licking may also be a greeting behavior and is thought to have developed from the face-licking wolf pups would do to stimulate the adults to regurgitate food when they return to the den from a hunt. Other submissive postures include tail down, a partially crouched or lowered body carriage, head and neck lowered, almost as if the dog was preparing to duck under something. Avoiding eye contact by turning the head to the side is also common, as is not directly facing the opponent, but turning the body to the side. The eyes may be dilated, and the mouth may show some horizontal retraction of the lips. Dogs that show submission may sometimes whine or whimper, but do not bark or growl. The goal of threatening behaviors is to warn the opponent to go away or stop engaging in whatever behavior the dog is viewing as a threat. A threatening dog does not want to hurt the opponent, but merely make him stop what he is doing. In order to reduce the risk of miscommunication as much as possible, threatening behaviors tend to be just the opposite of submissive behaviors. In an offensive threat, the body is held very stiff and erect. The tail is high. The ears are up or pricked forward. A direct stare is common, and the dog is often directly facing his opponent. When viewed head-on, the offensively threatening dog seems to have the tip of his tail arising from between his ears. Piloerection, either on the back, tail, or both, may be seen. The dog may or may not be barking, growling, or showing his teeth with the lips retracted vertically. Offensively motivated dogs may also lunge toward the opponent, or actually chase him. A defensive threatening dog usually holds his ears back or down. Tail is tucked or partially tucked. Eye contact is avoided, and the dog does not directly face the opponent. Not all of these postures need necessarily be seen, especially if the dog's motivation is somewhat mixed or ambivalent, which is very common. Ambivalent dogs may show a mixture of offensive and defensive behavior. Defensively threatening dogs may also bark, growl, or show their teeth by retracting the lips horizontally. You'll notice that a defensive threat and submission have some elements in common, such as ear and tail carriage, avoidance of eye contact, and of facing the opponent. However, the body of a defensively threatening dog will tend to be stiffer and more frozen than the loose, sometimes almost wiggly behavior of the submissive dog. Listen carefully for any vocalizations. If you're not sure if the dog is defensive or submissive, either wait a few minutes and see what the dog does, or assume less threatening postures yourself to see how the dog reacts. Threats can also include snapping behavior, defined as an inhibited bite that never touches the opponent. Dogs are experts at gauging the intensity by which they use their mouths. Very seldom is a target quick enough to move away or avoid a dog who truly intends to bite. Likewise, an owner is usually not quick enough to pull the dog away from a target he is committed to biting. Dogs usually end up delivering exactly the kind of contact they intended, whether it be not touching the target at all, to teeth touching without leaving a visible mark, to various levels of inhibited biting, to a full bite resulting in significant injury. Threats may or may not escalate to aggression, which includes those behaviors that result in harm to the opponent. In dogs, this usually means a bite. Any contact which leaves some sort of injury can technically be categorized as aggression. However, most inhibited bites that do not result in serious injury, such as torn clothing, a red mark, or a bruise, could be viewed as a threat instead. Clearly, the dog had the opportunity to deliver more serious injury, but made the choice not to. Aggression can also be categorized as offensive, defensive, or quite commonly mixed motivation, depending on the accompanying body postures and the presence or absence of chasing, lunging, or backing away. Classifying aggressive behavior into additional types or categories may sometimes be difficult to do. Any classification scheme is always somewhat arbitrary. The only value of attempting to label aggression as a particular type is to be better able to predict what a dog is likely to do next in that particular situation. For example, a defensively threatening or aggressive dog is unlikely to chase you down the street or charge across a room to bite you. However, an offensively threatening dog may. Types of aggression are determined primarily by the contexts in which they occur. Territorially motivated dogs become threatening toward individuals they perceive as territorial intruders and in locations they perceive to be their territory. This may include not only the owner's property, but also the owner's car or even a park or bike path where the dog is frequently walked. Once away from his territory, the dog may be friendly. Fear-motivated aggression is in response to any sort of attempted interaction with the dog that triggers fear. People often unintentionally trigger such behavior with the greeting postures they typically use. These consist of facing the dog, staring at him, leaning over him, and reaching over his head to pet him or let him sniff a hand. Instead of using these greeting postures, you should assume a non-threatening position by turning the side of your body toward the dog, avoiding eye contact. Keep your hand at your sides and possibly crouching down or partially bending the knees. Do not lean over from the waist. Dogs can potentially react with fear-motivated aggression to almost any attempt at interaction, but common triggers could be reaching for the dog's collar or attempting to snap on a leash, attempting to pick up a dog, or dangling a leash toward him. Possessive behavior occurs anytime the dog believes he is in direct competition with another individual for a resource. The resource might be food, a toy, or a favorite resting place when another individual walks by. Protective aggression occurs when a dog is protecting or defending a member of his social group. To label behavior as protective, look for some type of interaction with the owner that the dog could interpret as a threat. Examples include shaking hands, handing the owner something such as a package, hugging the owner, or roughhousing. If the dog reacts in a threatening way when an individual simply walks toward him and his owner, the dog is more likely attempting to keep the individual away from himself rather than the owner. One way to test this interpretation would be to approach the dog when he is next to an unfamiliar person to see if his behavior is different. Many owners incorrectly believe the dog is protecting them, when in fact he is fearful and only defending himself. Maternal aggression is easily identified, as it only occurs when a dam, or on rare occasions a sire, is protecting a litter of puppies. The female's threatening behavior could be triggered by merely approaching too closely or by some sort of attempt at interaction with the pups. Dominance-motivated threats and aggression are directed toward members of the dog's social group or when a dog is attempting to establish a dominant position with an unfamiliar individual. This form of aggression could result when a new dog is brought into a home of a well-established dog. Predation is technically not aggression. Aggression is a social behavior, while predation is a means of obtaining food. We include it here because it can result in injury to small animals, children, and any fast-moving individuals such as joggers, bicyclers, or skateboarders. Predatory-like behavior can be triggered by erratic movements from children, small animals such as cats and birds, or wildlife such as deer and squirrels. Predatory behavior is usually not accompanied by any vocalizations, which would obviously be a disadvantage in attempting to surprise the prey. There is no evidence to indicate that dogs who show predatory behavior toward animals such as cats or deer are predisposed to show predatory behavior toward children, especially if the dog is normally friendly toward them. When dogs greet each other, the behavior can vary depending upon the mood of each dog and the situation. For dogs that are unfamiliar with each other, there will usually be a head-to-head approach and mutual sniffing around the muzzle. This is often followed by one or both dogs moving down the side of the other dog and sniffing each other's anal and genital area. What happens after that can be variable. The dogs may play, or wander away from each other, or even begin to threaten each other. Dogs that are unsure of the situation will usually move more slowly during the greeting than those that are sure of things. During the approach and initial contact among the dogs, always watch for the signs of threat and aggression we described earlier, especially staring, stiffened body posture, and low growls. Threatening behavior should always be taken seriously as a sign of a possible fight, and threatening dogs should not be allowed to continue to threaten each other. Dogs that are familiar with each other and are friendly will tend to run up to each other excitedly, tails wagging rapidly, and may jump on each other, whimper, whine, bark, or even growl in a playful way. They may lick each other's faces and may sniff the anal and genital area of the other dog. Either dog may show submissive gestures with the ears back, head down, tail down, or the body may be more relaxed and alert with the ears and tail in a more neutral position. They may play, move away from each other, or just stay near each other exploring the environment. Dogs tend to greet people in the same sort of ways they greet other dogs. When they greet familiar people, they tend to run up to them excitedly, tails wagging.